This is an electric blanket from the company Jartoo, but this is no ordinary electric blanket. If you're interested in finding out more about it, keep watching. Before we get started, I want to thank the company Jartoo for reaching out and offering to send me their electric blanket so that I could share it with you. Currently, it is still in Kickstarter, and I'll put the link to the Kickstarter project in the video description, of course, but I expect it'll be ready for retail sale very, very shortly. Now, full disclosure, when Jartoo reached out and offered to send this blanket to me, it just happened to be at the same time I was going through my setup for winter camping. And one of the things that I was looking at was supplemental sources of heat for camping, car camping primarily. And of course, I have wood stoves and I now have a hot tent, and that's great. And you should always have a sleep system that is up to the temperatures that you can expect. But having a supplemental heat source can make it much more comfortable, even if you are well equipped otherwise. So when I looked at their Kickstarter page, there were a couple of photos that kind of intrigued me. And basically, one was of a person sitting on a bank in a chair with this blanket wrapped around them, doing some fishing, and the blanket was plugged into a power station. I said, yeah, okay, I can see that. That's great. I saw another one where there was a person inside of a tent doing exactly the same thing with this blanket plugged into a power station. Now, here was my mistake. I had assumed, and that was wrong of me, that this was a 12-volt blanket. It is not. It is a 110-volt blanket AC current. Now, it will still work with the power stations, but I just wanted to declare that it's not exactly what it was I thought I was getting at the time. Now, having said that again, I've had this now for a little over 2 months, and I've come to appreciate just what it is capable of, and I still think it fits the role of car camping, van camping, overlanding, and possibly even tenting, but you're not going to be carrying it very far. All right, let's get started. All right, quickly, I'm going to go through the physical specifications for the blanket so we can get on to talking about its key features and my experiences using it. So overall, the blanket comes in at 4.2 pounds. Certainly not ultra light and not ultra small, as you can see, but then again, if you're car camping or overlanding, I don't think weight or bulk is that much of an issue. It is 60 inches by 50 inches in dimensions. It's made of a 230 gram per square meter fleece, and it's one of the softest fleece, if not the nicest fleece I have seen on any blanket, or at least any electric heated blanket. Very, very nice. And you can see it's got this gray color with a little bit of a sheen. Nice dark gray neutral color at that. Now, it has a few other key features and technology worth knowing. One is, as I mentioned, it runs off of a 24-volt DC system internally, even though it uses the 110 current from the wall. It has overcurrent protection, it has short circuit protection, and it has a memory for the last level used. If you were using it at level 4 and you decided to turn it off and then turn it back on, it starts up again at level 4. All right, I wanted to go through a few of the key features for the Jartoo heated blanket, some of which I have already mentioned, but they are worth mentioning again, such as the fact that the technology that makes this blanket work is carbon nanotube, also called graphene, a carbon fiber that is throughout the blanket with the exception of that border around the edges, and it is what sets this apart from any other heated blanket that I'm aware of on the market. It also means that you're going to get a even heat distribution throughout the blanket. No hot spots, no cold spots. It also means you get a very rapid heating time. As I mentioned before, the company claims 1 minute heating time. My experience is it's faster than that. Now, it gets hotter, but I can start feeling the heat within seconds, 20, 30 seconds at the most of turning the unit on. One of the other nice things about this is that it does come with that remote control. Now, the remote control allows you not only to turn the blanket on and off and alter the level of heat, but it also has a timer that you can adjust for having it turn off automatically, which is actually quite valuable to have when you are using this car camping, because you're going to want to use this, well, at least this is my experience and my recommendation, you're going to want to use this to get the bed nice and warm when you get into it, But you're not going to need that heat all night long. Once you are nice and warm and cozied into your whatever sleep system you have, you let the blanket turn itself off and you program it. You'll know when it's the right time for it. At the same time, if it's early in the morning at the 4 or 5 o'clock when everything seems to be coldest, you can grab that remote and turn it back on and it'll come right back up to temperature again. So that's a neat feature as well. Here is something again that makes this, I think, stands apart from almost every electric blanket that I'm aware of. This is machine washable. I have another electric blanket here today that I'm going to be comparing this with in a moment, but that one is, it says right on the label, do not machine wash, spot wash or spot clean only. This can be cleaned in the wash machine. It can also be thrown in the dryer, although they recommend at very low heat. But the good news is it can be washed in the washing machine. That it means it's an especially durable blanket. Now that's the other reason why this is different than a lot of electric blankets. A lot of them that I looked at say right on their use label, do not sit or lay on this product. I'm not quite sure why, if they feel that it's going to damage the wires on the inside, if they feel there's a burn risk associated with being in direct contact with the blanket. This one is different. If you want to lay on top of this blanket as opposed to laying under this blanket, then you can do so with complete safety. And I will actually mention in a few moments' time, I tried both and I'll tell you what my preference is, or at least what my recommendation for using it is. Again, not something you can do with other electric blankets for sure. It also has a full 1-year warranty, but if you register it, you extend the warranty to 2 years. All right, I thought I'd do a quick demonstration of the Jartoo electric blanket, show you how it operates, and it is very simple, of course. And then we'll bring the other blanket into the picture so I can talk about the testing I did and the comparison between the two and my preferred method of using the Jartoo. I think you're going to be interested in that. So to start with, we have my AC2A from Bluetti, great little power station. This will be what I'll be using for demonstration purposes today. So let's start by turning the unit on. Shows me I have 99% of capacity. I will need to turn the AC inverter on. I'll plug the adapter in. Now, the cable itself has just over 6 feet of extension, which is nice so that you're not restricted where you put the power station and blankets. You have a little bit of flexibility in terms of being able to move it about without, tugging or tangling up or anything else. In this corner of the blanket is where the operating button for the blanket itself is, as you can see right there. On the reverse side is a little pocket, kind of a hidden pocket, a little zipper right here. This is where the plug for the inverter, well, not the inverter, but the adapter plugs into, so let's do that. Now, in order to turn the blanket on, you just press and hold, and it will light up. Right now it's lighting up in blue, and if I want to run through the different heat levels, now I just tap. Green, purple, I guess, another different color of a blue-green, not quite orangey, and then red. So those are my description of the colors. Red is the highest of the levels. I'll be putting the expected heat that you can get from this blanket in the video description, and I'll give you a comparison between what is rated and what reality is, at least the reality I found for it in a minute. So there it is on its highest, which will bring it up to its highest heat. Now, I want to point this out because I'm going to show you the draw of the current in a moment. It doesn't matter which level you turn it on at, it will still draw the same amount of current until it gets up to the heat level that you want it at. I can feel the heat coming out of this blanket right now. So that's important to understand. It will still draw the same amount of heat. The difference will be is once it gets up to that heat level, it will, well, there are thermostats built in, it will turn itself off and then back on, off and on, just enough to maintain that heat level. So if you're at the red level, the inverter or your power station is going to be working more often than if it was down at the blue level. So what you want to do is find out what is the lowest level I can get away with and still be warm in order to save and use the least amount of electricity out of your battery. So right now, it should be demonstrating. Yeah, it says right here, Hopefully that's going to show up on camera. 73 watts, and that's what this draws from the blanket, is 73 watts, at least until it gets up to its proper heat level. All right, that's basically all there is to it. The only other thing is the operation of the remote control. And to start the remote control, there is an on-off button here. Right now, it immediately tells me we are at level 6. It's not really, really bright, but maybe in the dark, you don't need it to be bright. It'll obviously show up. So I am at level 6, and I can just work my way through the levels. There's up and down buttons here, and then the timer buttons here, and that will allow me to set the shutoff time. Simple operation, right? Okay, that's all I need to do in order to show you how this works. What I want to do is bring that other blanket in and talk about my testing. All right, let's talk about the testing I did with the Jartoo heated blanket and the results I got. And what I was looking to do is compare them against the claims that the company had for this blanket, just to see if it lived up to expectations. So I have the manual open right here, and I just quickly am going to go through the different heat levels and what they claim the temperatures of the blanket will be. So starting at the lowest with the blue level, you can expect 95 degrees Fahrenheit or 35 degrees Celsius. Now, I won't go through every one of them because they will be in the video description if you're interested. Suffice it to say, when it gets to level 6, the rated temperature of this blanket is 131 degrees Fahrenheit or 55 degrees Celsius. All right, so how does that compare with my testing that I did? So I have a few notes that I'm going to be referring to. Now, in order to do this testing, this is, how can I say, I tried to make it somewhat realistic, but it wasn't entirely because there are a lot of factors that are going to go into the testing. I have no idea what the testing Jartoo did in order to come up with that claim. And I don't think the fact that my numbers are different, yes, they will be a little bit different, I don't think that is an indication that they're not being accurate with their temperatures. I think it's more of an indication of my testing than anything else. So just to be clear, I turned this on. Well, here's how I did the testing. I laid this blanket down on our bed. I folded it over, and I used a digital cooking thermometer, one with a remote probe, and I placed that in the center of the fold, and I put the blanket on high on the red level, and I let it go for 20 minutes. Max temperature I could get out of it is 105 degrees Fahrenheit. Not that close to the rated one is 131 degrees. So it is significantly cooler, at least the results I got. I then ran it down through the temperatures, and it still had a differential all the way down. So a couple of things that I observed during that time, and a couple of reasons for the difference in performance from what it is rated for. To start with, this was not laid out flat on a bed. It did not have another blanket on top of it. I was not lying under it. Are those factors that would make for a difference in the heat levels? Potentially, and I'll talk about the best way to get the most efficient heating out of this. So that is part of what I experienced. The other thing is that the blanket ran at 73 watts, as I showed you on the power station, the entire time. It did not drop down at any point. In other words, it never reached its top temperature where the thermostat said we can take a rest for a few minutes and then bring it back on again. But the reason for that was very simple. It was spread out. Well, okay, it was doubled, but it was spread out. And what's happening, of course, is that heat is radiating out at the blanket at a rate greater than it's retaining it. If you understand what I'm saying, it can never get up to that top temperature and then stop, because it's continually radiating heat out. My experience with that is what leads me into what I consider the best way to use this blanket, which we'll get to in a moment. So that's my experience in using this blanket in terms of its rated temperatures and what I got out of my comparisons. Now, when I did take it down to the lowest, the blue temperature, as I mentioned, it'll still show 73 watts being drawn until you get to temperature. Then it did shut down. In other words, it was able to bring it up to the temperature of whatever the blue level is. I think I mentioned it a minute ago. It is, well, let me just say that again because, you know, it's good to know. 95 degrees. So it rates at 95 degrees. So the blanket came up to 95 degrees. It shut down. And then it averaged 11 watts to maintain that heat of 95 degrees. Now that's important because what that means is that rather than this blanket drawing 73 watts from your power station all night long if you're out car camping or overlanding, it could just drop down to 11 watts. That means you're going to get a much longer runtime out of the blanket, and that means you can get away with either a smaller battery or you can expect to have power left over in the morning and not have it been run dry. At 73 watts, this wouldn't last, that little battery wouldn't last all night long, likely. But 11 watts, yeah, of course it would. That would be much better. Okay, that's the testing I got with this blanket. I just want to bring the other blanket in for a moment because I think this is important because I just had the opportunity to do some side-by-side testing. All right, the good fortune I had was that I already was in possession of an electrically heated blanket. This is a Sunbeam electrically heated blanket. It was gifted to us from my mother-in-law, and it turns out to be pretty much exactly the same size. I think it may be an inch or two smaller in one dimension and a couple of ounces lighter. All understandable because this is using the traditional wires throughout technology, and as I mentioned, I actually got under them to see if I could feel the difference, and yeah, you can feel a difference between the two blankets in terms of the broadness of the heating or the evenness of the heating, I guess we'll say. Now, the Sunbeam has a few other handicaps when compared to the Jartoo as well. One, it's not machine washable, it's spot washable only. The Fleece, while it is nice, it's nowhere near as nice as it is on the Jartoo, without question. It has adjustments. Where is the adjustment knob? So here is the controller for it, so it's a little bit different. There's no remote control. It is a high, medium, low. And so I plugged this into the power station. Now, before I tell you the results I got, you need to know that Jartoo claims that their heated blanket is up to 60% more efficient in terms of energy draw than traditional electrically heated blankets. That's simply not the case, at least for the Sunbeam. And I think that's a pretty fair comparison. I got virtually identical results as far as energy use for the Sunbeam that I did with the Jartoo. So that's, I don't know what blanket they were comparing it against, but if I was looking to compare one against the other, these would be the two I'd probably compare, is these two, because of the same size and everything else. Now, the Jartoo does have a few other features that make it worth considering. In addition to that carbon fiber nanotechnology, the graphene material in it, it is and that nice even heat it provides. It is also machine washable. It is also more durable. It is something you can sit or lay down on, whereas this is not machine washable. It is a little bit more fragile in terms of the wires are. It's not something I want to flex a whole lot just because at some point I've heard of this one hasn't, but I've heard of blankets failing from too much flexing, I guess we'll say. So those are the differences. So this blanket functionally drew the same amount of electricity as this blanket. Now, my own experiences using them is I much prefer the Jartoo, quite honestly. I much prefer the Jartoo for a few reasons. One is that even heat, that as I mentioned. Now the quick startup time, well, okay, after a couple minutes this is going to be up to temperature as well. It also has a thermostat, so it will shut down and shut itself off as well. So, there's a lot of similarities, but there are some distinct differences. Now, here's what I found in using the Jartoo and why I prefer it over this one, the Sunbeam. First off, I don't lay under this blanket, I lay on top of it. And I do that for a couple of reasons. The quilts that I would be using, I don't feel the need to put an additional one on top of me, which would be this blanket, but I can still get a lot of heat from this. Actually, I feel even more heat from this blanket by laying on top of it rather than have it lay on top of me. And I think we capture more heat underneath the quilt by doing it that way. That means that you can turn the temperature down on the Jartoo and have it save even more energy. And because it's retaining more heat, that means the thermostat is going to shut it off and it will save even more energy from your power bank or power station that you're using for it. So that's the reason I like using the Jartoo. I tried the same thing with the Sunbeam, and one, it's not comfortable because you can feel the wires right through it. Also, it's not recommended. You're not supposed to be sitting or laying on these things. You're also not supposed to double them up like I have this one. And right now, I wouldn't turn this on electrically because there are hot spots created, and that can create an overload in the current and everything else, none of which can occur with the Jartoo. Okay, so that is my comparison using the two blankets side by side, why I prefer the Jartoo. I think we can probably wrap this video up. All right, there is one more feature that I almost forgot to show you, and if you recall back when the video opened, I talked about one of the images on the Kickstarter page showed a person sitting in a chair in streamside doing some fishing with one of these wrapped around them to keep them warm. And that's the feature I want to show with you. One side of the blanket has two sets of dome snaps. They're a heavy-duty plastic dome snap, and you can just turn this into a cape. Throw it over your shoulders, find the snaps, snap it together, make sure my microphone is clear. There's a second snap down here, and then you can just wrap yourself up in this. And this is actually not bad even for sitting around the house. If you're watching TV and you want to turn the temperature down in the house and you want to stay warm, this actually works pretty good. But of course, the use that I would be looking for is, how would this work if I was doing some car camping? Absolutely. You could be sitting outdoors under the stars or in the morning waiting for your coffee to prepare and stay nice and warm inside of this blanket. All right, now we can wrap this video up. All right, there's one more thing that I haven't mentioned about the Jartoo blanket, and this is going to be a consideration for a number of people, and that is cost. Yes, this blanket is much more expensive than the Sunbeam. You can usually get the Sunbeams on sale on Amazon at a much reduced cost over the Jartoo. But when you consider the features, the durability, the functionality of the Jartoo blanket, this one really starts to come into its own. The one feature that this does not compete well with is the energy consumption. And it's not that it's worse. In fact, they're equal as far as energy consumption goes. They both consume the same amount of energy. They will both shut down when the thermostat reaches the temperature that it's set for. So as far as energy consumption goes, this is not a winner, but it's not a loser. It still works well. But in terms of functionality, the way you can use this blanket, the way that it heats, the fact that you can wash this blanket and you can't wash the other in a washing machine, means that this is going to give you more versatility than the other one will. Okay, so those are what I wanted to put out in terms of my thoughts on using the Jartoo electrically heated blanket. Now I'm going to open it up to you. What are your thoughts? Do you think this is worth the extra money? Do you think this is an investment worth considering for yourself? Any comments, any questions, put those in the comment section. As I mentioned, I'll put the links to the Kickstarter as well as all the specifications in the video description. All right, until next time, get out and explore and take that pathless travel, because it will make all the difference. Bye for now.